ਪੰਜਾਬ ਟੀਵੀ ਔਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਸਾਡੀ ਇੱਕ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਸੈਗਮੈਂਟ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨਸ ਹੁਣ ਸਿਰਫ 3-4 ਦਿਨ ਹੀ ਦੂਰ ਨੇ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨਸ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਤੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਆਊਟਰੀਚ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਲਾ ਚੱਲਦਾ ਫਿਰਦਾ ਚਿਹਰਾ ਆਨਰੇਬਲ ਜੇਸਨ ਕੇਨੀ ਹੁਣੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਨੇ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਟਫ ਕੁਐਸਚਨਸ ਦਾ ਜਵਾਬ ਦੇਣਗੇ ਐਂਡ ਹੀ ਇਜ਼ ਰੈਡੀ ਫॉर दैट Most welcome, Mr. Kenney.
Great to be here. Sat Sri Akal. I'm glad to finally be on your new show. Congratulations on it.
Thank you. ਤੇ ਮੇਰਾ ਸਾਥ ਦੇਣਗੇ ਜੀ ਮਨਨ ਗੁਪਤਾ ਹਣੀ ਮਨਨ ਜੀ ਵੈਰੀ ਵੈਲਕਮ
ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਵੈਰੀ ਮਚ ਦੀਪਕ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਔਰ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਟੈਲੀਵਿਜ਼ਨ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਿਆਰ ਭਰੀ ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਡੈਫੀਨੇਟਲੀ ਇਟਸ ਅ ਗ੍ਰੇਟ ਮੂਮੈਂਟ ਫॉर ਆਵਰ ਸ਼ੋ ਐਂਡ ਆਵਰ ਟੀਵੀ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਟੂ ਹੈਵ ਆਨਰੇਬਲ ਜੇਸਨ ਕੈਨੀ ਜੁਆਇਨ ਅਸ ਇਟਸ ਰਾਈਟ we are in the final stretch for the 42nd general elections so hopefully things will move in the right direction because we want polling numbers to go up. We want you to be engaged, and that is why we have Jason Kenney amongst us to answer some of the questions which community has been bugging us.
Sure. Mr. We don't have much time, so we have to discuss a lot of questions. So I will directly jump on to questions.
Go for it.
On October 22nd, 2014, there was attack on the parliament. Do you think that was a terrorist attack or just a gun violence?
Obviously, it was a terrorist attack. The tape of the Mr. Bibo was released where he made it absolutely clear that his attack was motivated by a political ideological agenda, and he was inspired by the so-called Islamic State terror group in the Middle East. And for Mr. Mulcair or anybody else to be confused about this is very peculiar. I mean, the targets he selected were soldiers standing guard at our National War Memorial and our parliament. There could not be a more obvious expression of political violence, and that's what terrorism really is.
But in recent history, if we see India or Israel or US, Spain, England, terrorist attacks, the terrorists are in groups, not one person.
No, not necessarily. In fact, right now in Israel, almost every day, ordinary Jewish people are getting stabbed by individuals. So the point of terrorism is not whether it's an individual or a group of individuals. The point of terrorism is if it's political violence designed to send a political message or to scare people or a society into changing their policies. So it's using violence for political means is what terrorism really is.
Did Tom Mulcair guide the government and he helped you guys to frame Bill C-51 or not?
No, Mr. Mulcair was opposed to Bill C-51.
He opposed. He never guided you. Never.
No.
There was all party meeting on this issue or not?
Well, yes, in the Parliament there certainly was, and at the Committee of Justice, which considered the bill for hours, and NDP proposed amendments, but the NDP has been consistently opposed to Bill C-51. Mr. Trudeau's party voted for it.
Yeah, and Mr. Trudeau, he wanted some kind of amendments in that. Why you guys didn't agree on that?
Well, I'm not sure what amendments they proposed, and I'm really not clear.
Because he is making huge issue in this election because of those amendments.
Well,
even though he favored the bill, right?
Yeah, I think this is typical of Justin Trudeau. He can't figure out what his position is. He voted for the bill, but now he says he's basically against it. I mean, this is Mr. Trudeau who can't even find a position on the largest trade agreement in world history, the Trans-Pacific Partnership that was signed 2 weeks ago. So I don't think we can take him very seriously on national security issues. He also wants to withdraw Canadian Air Force from the international military coalition against the so-called Islamic State, which would leave the fight to all of our allies with Canada backing out. That's not our tradition.
But Canada is a peaceful country, right? Like, do you think like we have to be part of NATO or we have to go there?
Yes, because sometimes the only way you can preserve and protect a peace is through confronting forces of violence, and in this case, terror. The notion that Canada has always been a, quotes, peacekeeping country, never involved in confronting evil, is not historically accurate. Of course, Canadian soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy to help liberate Germany from Nazi terror. We protected the people of Korea from a communist invasion. Our history is one of a responsible democracy, and right now we have a terrorist organization in the Middle East trying to create its own so-called caliphate, its own terror state, and it's trying to commit genocide against, it is committing genocide against the religious and ethnic minorities of Iraq and Syria. It's kidnapped and is raping women and girls as young as the age of 8. It has declared war on Canada. It inspired the murder of 2 of our troops on our own soil, and it has attracted over 130 30 young Canadians to join its so-called jihad, every one of whom represents a security threat should they return to Canada. And so we have an absolute interest in ensuring that the Islamic State terror group does not succeed in creating a terrorist state that can be used to project its violence around the world.
It's a very, very harsh bill, and it's a very harsh law. One question I want to clear through you. I know if somebody is planning against our state like Canada, that's absolutely fine. But say if there are a few organizations, if they are planning war against U.S. or India from mainland Canada, say for example Khalistan, so will they be treated as terrorists or not?
Well, Khalistani terrorist groups like the Babbar Khalsa are considered terrorist groups and have been for over 20 years under Canadian law. That's nothing new. That's nothing relevant to Bill C-51. If you're an organization that is committed to using violence to achieve political or religious ends, you are qualified categorized as a terrorist group. So yes, the Babbar Khalsa, the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, there are dozens and dozens of terror groups listed under our law, but I don't agree that Bill C-51 is harsh.
Yeah.
It's actually rather modest if you look at the comparable laws in other democracies. To give you one example, C-51 allows a judge to order the detention of somebody who is deemed on the evidence likely to commit a terrorist offense. If we had that law in place last October, it's almost certain that Warrant Officer Patrice Vincent would be alive and would not have been murdered by Michael Rouleau, the ISIS-inspired terrorist, because the RCMP were tracking that man. They knew he was likely to commit a terrorist offense, but we did not have the legal basis to seek his detention. Now, to put this in comparison, a Canadian judge could detain someone like the terrorist Rouleau for up to 7 days if deemed likely to commit a terrorist offense. 7 days only. In Britain, it's 28 days. So our approach is far more modest than most other Western democracies.
Mr. Kenney, this has been one of the longest campaign periods in Canada, 78 days to be precise, and we are in the final stretch, 3 days away from the D-Day, October 19th. How do you see this campaign going? There have been a lot of ups and downs, a lot of poll numbers. It has been a roller coaster, much, higher than the Canada's Wonderland, I would say. So what is your reaction to that? Because you have been the most popular, most in demand conservative minister.
Well, maybe I don't know if I'm in demand, but I show up whether people want me to or not. I will say this, it has been a very fluid campaign. It's the only election campaign, I think, in modern Canadian history where 3 parties have been in the lead in the polls at one point or another. But the reason we have had a long campaign is because our government, as a democratic reform, brought in a fixed date for the election in legislation to make it fairer for everyone. Before, governments would pick a date that was to their party's advantage. Now everyone's known when the date would be. That meant that all summer long we were going to have a campaign anyway. So anyway, I hope people will focus on the important issues like the economy. I hope they'll realize that our government has given Canada the best economic growth record in the G7, the best job creation record, 1.3 million net new jobs, the lowest federal taxes in 60 years, the low interest rates, low inflation, a balanced federal budget, low federal debt, the highest level of home ownership in Canadian history and in the world, the wealthiest middle class and the highest family incomes in the world, according to the New York Times, and the highest in our history, the most stable financial institutions in the world. We've gone from 5 to 57 free trade agreements around the world, most recently with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We've massively improved our relations with India. I mean, so if people look at what we've achieved, I hope they will protect that and not risk it with high taxes and endless deficits.
Minister, there is a clause in Bill C-24 about the physical presence, and that's affecting most of our truck drivers that are driving towards U.S. So will you do something about that?
Yes, the bill, that provision was introduced in the new Citizenship Act because we had too many new citizens immediately leaving Canada, immediately upon becoming citizens and not coming back. And we felt this was clearly an abuse of our citizenship. Now, that is not the case for, let's say, truck drivers in the South Asian community. We're talking here about people typically from other countries of origin who are going back to tax havens and not living in Canada. So we wanted simply to ask them to say in good faith that they actually intend, upon becoming a Canadian citizen, to actually live in Canada. But here's the truth. The provision is, I think you're talking about the time calculated.
Yeah, time calculating, yes.
So
it will take almost 7-8 years for them.
So, look, I think you and others have, and Parm Gill have made a legitimate case that there are certain occupations where traveling is mandatory.
Yes,
It's
especially
not,
for truck drivers.
not discretionary. So I have said, and I will repeat now, that a re-elected Conservative government will pursue a exemption to the Citizenship Act that allows for flexibility in calculating the days required to obtain citizenship for people in the transportation sector, such as airlines, shipping, and trucking, because if it's a mandatory element of their job, but they clearly have maintained their home and their residency in Canada.
Yes.
I think there can be there should be some consideration for that. So the answer is yes, we will pursue an exemption to address the concern of those truck drivers.
That's really good news.
That's very good news, I must say, for the trucking industry, provided Conservatives come back with a majority.
Regardless, we'll support that.
That's wonderful. Mr. Kenney, you have often been credited with the majority mandate in 2011 elections because with your inroads into the ethno-cultural communities and due to your role as immigration minister and minister of multiculturalism. With the redistribution of seats, it was assumed that Conservatives will definitely have an edge with additional 30 seats added to the House of Commons. But looking at the poll numbers, especially in the province of Ontario, which was a major contributory factor for the majority in 2011, the recent poll numbers are showing more towards Liberals. How do you see whether your message has not been received well, or what is lacking? Because you are at every event, you know the pulse of people.
Well, listen, we don't get hung up on the polls. Polls have been terribly wrong in recent elections.
Okay.
If the polls were right, the NDP would be in the government of British Columbia, the Wild Rose Party would be the government of Alberta, etc. So the polls have been consistently wrong in recent elections, and the Conservative Party tends to do much better on election day than it has done in the polls. In the last 3 elections, we've got 3 to 4% more at election day than in the last series of polls. One poll I saw yesterday has a statistical tie. So I think there's going to be a lot of surprised people on Monday. But look, we've been in office for 10 years, and obviously it's easy to communicate a message of change, but we ask people, what change? Change that raises your taxes. Mr. Trudeau wants to impose a $1,000 additional payroll tax on everyone through Kathleen Wynne's pension tax. He wants to raise employment insurance premiums by $600 above what we are proposing. He wants to take away income splitting that benefits many South Asian families who have a mom or dad at home taking care of children. He wants to cut in half the tax-free savings account. And there are $6 billion of other unspecified tax increases in his platform. I don't think people in Ontario want to really vote for higher taxes and less money in their personal family budget in this election. And I know that South Asian Canadian families don't want to vote to legalize marijuana, which is one of Mr. Trudeau's top priorities. They don't want to support his plan to impose injection sites for illegal drugs in our communities. He said he wants many of those across Canada. They don't support Mr. Trudeau's policy of legalizing prostitution, which would create brothels in communities across Canada. They don't support his plan to repeal our tough on crime legislation. So I ask people not just to think, about change for its own sake, but to think about the real, serious policies and to vote based on their values.
What's your views on prostitution and assisted suicide? He's also there. He's saying that he will legalize it.
Exactly. So our view is that look, the Supreme Court made a decision striking down the old prostitution law. So we consulted broadly. We came up with a new law crafted to protect women and girls from exploitation. It basically says that we will not penalize women if they are involved in that activity, but we will penalize the pimps and people who profit from the misery of women. And we've made that a crime. Mr. Trudeau wants to repeal that. The implication of this, the implication is that we would end up with brothels operating legally in our communities, and that is not what I think most Canadians, for example, in the South Asian community, want to happen. In terms of euthanasia, Again, the Supreme Court made a ruling on this, and our government has appointed an expert panel made up of disability activists and others to advise us on how to carefully regulate this. Because I'll tell you something, I don't want to live in a country where elderly or infirm people feel like they are asked to be killed because they feel like they're being a burden to their families. I don't want handicapped people feeling vulnerable to that kind of treatment. So we're proposing a tight regulation. Mr. Trudeau has said basically that open up the doors to euthanasia.
And last time, Mr. Trudeau and Liberal Party, they supported gay marriages. What's your stand on that?
Well, we had a free vote on this and in Parliament. And the policy of the Conservative Party was to allow for a free vote on these issues, which we had in 2006 or 7. And we lost that vote, and so the law is what it is. But Mr. Trudeau...
Well, Conservative Party is in favor or not in favor?
We respect the current law. We're not going to change the current law.
And because of that law, you sacked Mr. Jagdish Garewal because he wrote an editorial in his newspaper Punjabi Post that if a kid is homosexual, he wants to be straight and he cannot go to his parents. What's wrong in that? Because that was a bill NDP brought in the provincial parliament, and he wrote on that.
First of all, let me say, I have a lot of personal regard for Jagdish Garewal. I think he's a respected voice in the community. He's a thoughtful and gentle person. And I think that the article said some very problematic things that many people found very offensive, and that the way, particularly that it had been translated. And when Jagdish was called by journalists about this, he didn't apologize, he didn't retract, he didn't clarify.
So there was a chance to apologize.
The Canadian press called him, and so this was the unfortunate situation.
But Mr. Kenney, don't you think that the party didn't give him enough chance to present his case? He was dumped like nobody else, considering he was a star candidate, and especially when we are sitting down in our studio, this happens to be his riding, Mississauga Malton. Considering the fact that you were part of his campaign launch, you were really pushing.
I have a lot of regard for Jagdish, and I regret what happened. Normally, when something like this comes out and somebody has said something that's controversial or offensive, they're given an opportunity to clarify, retract, apologize. And in this instance, an interview happened where where there was no clarity.
What if he wins? He will be back to caucus?
Well, Mr. Harper said that he wouldn't be seated as a Conservative MP, but he's still on the ballot, and again, I personally have a high regard for him, and I don't believe he meant to be offensive.
Mr. Kenney, we know that there has been too many fraud marriages in this area, and we are the one who brought in your attention about the Arshpreet case, right? Yes. And you made a law.
Yes.
But the concern about is processing times. It's taking 2 years.
I agree, it's too long.
Like, do you think, instead of buying F-35, you can put that money, those dollars in the immigration budget?
Let's not create a false choice between having an Air Force and having...
because you are the spokesperson for both, immigration and defense.
Nicely played.
Yeah, unofficial for one, but official.
Good argument. Listen, I do think that is a problem. We have succeeded in clearing up most of the backlogs in the immigration system, federal skilled workers, and we cut in half the parents and grandparents backlog. We've eliminated the asylum backlog and many other backlogs. But the processing times for spousal sponsorship applications are too long. Yes. And if we're re-elected, we have to address that, absolutely.
Or maybe if you can give a visitor visa for 2 months, 3 months,
fair enough.
Some kind of that. This is community issue and they want this. And secondly, our community wants their family to be brought here, like parents, on a permanent basis instead of super visa.
But they are being brought on a permanent basis more than ever before. In addition to the super visa, we admit about 20 to 25,000 parents and grandparents every year as permanent residents. And so, for example, since our government came to office, we have admitted, I believe, well over 100,000 parents and grandparents. Here you are. since we've come to office, we've admitted 171,000 parents and grandparents to Canada versus 154,000 in the first 9 years of the previous Liberal government. So we've increased the number of parents and grandparents getting permanent residency.
Including super visa?
In addition to the super visa,
Oh,
in addition,
okay.
because here you see this part is the number of parents and grandparents getting permanent residency, which is about 20,000 a year. In addition, there's another 15,000 a year getting the super visa. Just to put this in comparison, the last year of the previous Liberal government, 12,500 parents and grandparents got permanent residency and none got the super visa. Under our government last year, 20,000 parents and grandparents got permanent residency and 15,000 got the super visa. If you add the two categories together, that's 3 times more.
Yesterday, I guess 2 days ago, Prime Minister was here, and you were there too in Pearson.
For the Canada-India Friendship Group.
Canada-India Friendship Group, and his wife, Lorraine, and she danced on a Bollywood dance.
Yes.
And people's like they're watching you in kurta pajama like me, right? So people, most of the community people, they say that like you are playing politics of populism. Is that true?
We're having fun with the community. I plead guilty.
Well,
And also one more thing, what people say out there, that is a win-win situation for Honorable Jason Kenney. Like if the government comes, it's good. If not, he is doing PR for leadership.
No.
Yes, yeah, no, that's
Are you going to go against Peter MacKay?
No, let's give some kind of.
That's what we call a leading question. First of all, look, my honest, sincere, personal hope is that we form another Conservative government and Prime Minister Harper continues as leader. I do not get obsessed with those kinds of questions about future ambitions. You know why? Yeah. Because A, I'm extremely busy with my current jobs, and B, I don't want to be one of those politicians who becomes obsessed or kind of idolizes a particular ambition. Those people allow the end to justify the means. I don't want to be that person.
But looking ahead, if there is a moment where there is a leadership vacuum, there will be some people in your party who have to bring their name forward. Will your name be one of them?
I don't know.
Okay.
Honestly, if you ask me, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. But
but your supporters, your well-wishers, they want an answer.
When people raise it with me, my answer is I haven't made a decision about that.
Few more questions. Will you take support or give support in case of minority government to any of Liberals or NDP or not?
It would depend. I mean, obviously, we hope to be in government, but we would assess each issue on an issue-by-issue basis. We would not be in a coalition, but in a minority parliament, I think it's incumbent on each party to assess each issue on an individual basis.
And when you go to private dinners in our community, is that your personal fundraise or party fundraise?
When I do which?
When you go to a private dinner in our community, say
generally, they're not fundraisers. Generally, I've done I think over 70 job parties in South Asian homes during this campaign, which are not fundraisers. I've done a few fundraisers for other candidates, some for the party and some for my own constituency.
You mentioned about Chai Party, Honorable Prime Minister of India. He was also a Chai wala at one point of time. And looking at the closeness between Canada and India at this point of time, do you see? What do you see? Why is there a lack of trade agreement, coming into fruition between Canada and India? There have been a lot of talks. We have been seeing it in work from the last 6 years at least.
Very good question. So we've made huge progress in negotiating the Foreign Investment Protection and Promotion Agreement between Canada and India. In the latter 2 or 3 years of the Congress government of Manan Singhji, it all broke. Everything froze. The Indian bureaucracy wasn't doing anything on any issue, including Canada-India trade. And when Narendra Modi came back in, we made it clear that this was our top priority to ratify the Foreign Investment Agreement with India. This progress was made during his visit. I'll let you in on a scoop. Prime Minister Harper accepted Modiji's invitation to fly from Ottawa to Toronto on the Indian government airplane. Excuse me.
Bless you.
On the Indian government airplane, and they spent the whole flight talking about this. They came very close to an agreement, and we hope to get to one soon.
Okay, so that's hopefully something to be.
Exactly.
And Minister, in the closing remarks, you are very busy Minister.
Yes.
Very busy.
Yes, it's true.
And when did you get the time to sleep?
Not often. Not enough. Win, lose, or draw, I'm hoping to have a couple of nights in my own bed on next week.
Hopefully.
That's very true. And tell us something about your own riding, Calgary Midnapur. It's a new riding,
Yes.
because our viewers, they also want to know about your riding also, because you represent a wonderful new riding.
So my constituency is cut in half.
Right.
You go national, by the way, yes? You have people...
Yeah, we have people watching this in Australia and every part of Canada,
My goodness.
everywhere.
So my constituency got cut in half in the redistribution because I had, 180,000 constituents.
Okay.
So yes, I have a very vibrant suburban Calgary constituency that is increasingly diverse. And last election, I won 77% of the vote there. I was very gratified. I don't take anything for granted. My constituents are very generous in allowing me to work for the party across Canada, and I hope that they will return me next Monday.
Thank you very much, Minister, and hope to see you again.
I hope so. I certainly hope so as well.
Yes.
You guys have a great show, and you asked tough questions, and I always appreciate both of you are really truly professional voices in the South Asian media, and I think the kind of service you provide helps with the integration of members of the community and to explain important issues to newcomers. And also to be a voice for the community. And I think both of you do that with great professionalism. And so I congratulate you on your show and your good work.
Thank you very
so
much.
much.
And whether you are in power in coming May or not, but we would still like to send an invitation for our annual Road Today truck show.
Oh, I'd love to be there.
You are the hero for us.
We'd love to be there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So this was today's main special segment with the Minister of Defence in Canada, Honourable Jason Kenney. How do you like it? Please email us at info@punjabtv.ca. Thank you very much.